Okay, so have you ever heard a love story where somebody gets revenge for their murdered love by, like, digging up their body and crowning them queen?
Um, no, I can't say that I have. That's pretty intense.
It sounds like something out of a movie, right? But it really happened. This is the crazy story of King Pedro Servet of Portugal and Inês de Castro. And, you guys sent us this article in this Noble Blood podcast episode about it. And wow, it's got everything. Forbidden love, politics, revenge of the works.
Yeah, I listened to that podcast too. It's a wild ride. And it's not just a love story, you know. It really gives you a glimpse into what Portugal was like in the 1300s, all the political drama and everything.
Right, right. So set the scene for us a little bit. What was going on back then?
Well, you got to imagine Portugal and Castile, that's Spain today, they're kind of always at each other's throats.
Oh, so like a real life Game of Thrones situation.
Exactly. Lots of power struggles and intrigue. And marriage, that was like the ultimate power move. King Alfonso IV, Pedro's dad, he was all about using marriage to, forge alliances and stuff.
So I'm guessing when it came time for Pedro to get hitched, it wasn't exactly a love match.
Not really, no. King Alfonso had it all figured out. Pedro was going to marry Constanza Manuel, a noble woman from Castile. Strategic move, keep the peace and all that.
But we know that it didn't quite go as planned, right?
Nope, not at all. Constanza shows up with all her ladies in waiting, and among them is this woman named Inés de Castro, and Pedro. Well, let's just say he fell head over heels for Inés, not Constanza.
Oh boy, that's going to cause some problems.
Yeah, talk about a scandal. Not just some royal gossip either. This had the potential to really mess things up between Portugal and Castile.
So you've got the king focused on politics, the prince in love with the wrong woman, and the wife caught in the middle. What did Constanza do? I mean, did she just sit back and watch this happen?
No, she did not. The article you sent mentioned how Constanza tried to use religion to break them up. She made Inés the godmother to her child. See, back then that meant Pedro and Inés couldn't be together, because it'd be like incest.
Wow, using religion as a weapon in a love triangle. That's pretty clever. But I get the feeling there were bigger things at play here than just a jealous wife.
Oh, for sure. King Alfonso was keeping a close eye on all of this. At first, maybe he thought, it's just a fling, it'll blow over. But then, things took a turn. Constanza's first son, he died when he was just a baby.
Oh, that's awful. I bet people started talking.
Oh, absolutely. Rumors are flying that Inés had something to do with it, maybe used witchcraft or something to get rid of her rival's heir.
So what started as a personal thing turned into a potential threat to the whole kingdom.
Exactly. You see, these rumors weren't just gossip. They played right into Alfonso's fears about Inés. Remember, she was from a powerful family in Castile, a family that might have its own agenda.
Okay, so now we've got this whole other layer, not just forbidden love, but the fate of Portugal hanging in the balance. What did Alfonso do?
Well, in 1355, he did something that would change everything. He went to Coimbra, where Inés was staying, and he had her assassinated. Just like that.
He had her killed.
He did. It was a brutal move. Alfonso was basically saying, don't mess with me. I'll do what it takes to protect my kingdom.
I mean, wow. He chose the throne over his own son's happiness.
Yeah. He thought Inés was a threat, plain and simple.
I can only imagine how Pedro felt when he found out. I mean, to lose the woman you love like that and at the hands of your own father.
Pedro was devastated, of course. But then that grief turned into rage. He raised an army and went to war against his own dad.
Wait, so a full-blown rebellion?
Yeah, things were about to get really ugly. Portugal was on the verge of a civil war. Luckily, Queen Beatrice Pedro's mom, she stepped in and managed to broker a peace treaty. But even though there was peace, Pedro never forgot what happened. He wanted revenge.
I bet the tension at court was so thick you could cut it with a knife.
Oh, absolutely. And everyone knew that this wasn't over. The story was far from finished.
So we've got a truce that's barely holding, a prince plotting revenge, and a king clinging to power. What happens next?
Well, in 1357, King Alfonso died, and Pedro took the throne. And let me tell you, his reign didn't begin with a celebration. It began with an act of vengeance.
So Pedro's the king now. He can finally get revenge for Inés. What'd he do?
Well, you'd think he went straight for those advisors, right? The ones who helped his dad with the assassination.
Yeah, for sure. Threw him in prison. Had him executed, maybe?
Well, the podcast you sent actually said Pedro pardoned 2 of them.
He what? Pardoned them? After what they did?
It seems that way, yeah. I mean, we don't know for sure what he was thinking, but maybe he thought showing mercy would I don't know, make him look more powerful.
Interesting. Okay, so 2 got off easy. What about the third one?
That's where things get, well, pretty dark. Pedro found that third advisor guy named Pedro Coelho, and he had this big dinner party, kind of like the one for the assassins in the last episode. And in the middle of it all, he had Coelho's heart ripped right out of his chest.
Whoa, so brutal. 2 get pardoned, 1 gets that. Why the difference?
It's hard to say. The podcast mentioned that Pedro thought this guy, Coelho, was like more directly involved in killing Inez. Maybe he was the one who actually, did it or gave the order. Whatever the reason, Pedro definitely wanted to make an example out of him. It was a message to everyone, don't mess with me.
Yeah, I got that message loud and clear. But it wasn't just revenge he was after, right? It feels like there was something more going on. The way he did it, so publicly and all.
Yeah, you're picking up on it. See, it wasn't enough to just punish these guys. Pedro wanted to change how people saw Inés. His dad had made her out to be this, enemy of the state. But Pedro, he wanted to make her a hero, the true Queen of Portugal.
Ah, so he was using all of this to legitimize her, even though she was gone.
Exactly. It was like this big dramatic performance, He wasn't just getting revenge, he was rewriting history.
That makes sense. Okay, so public revenge is step 1. What else did he do?
Well, this is where we get to the tombs. The article talks about how Pedro had these elaborate tombs built, one for himself and one for Inés. And they weren't just like regular tombs. These were works of art, super fancy, with carvings and everything.
So not just some headstones, he was really going all out.
No.
And these were part of his plan to, make Inez legit.
Absolutely. There were statements like, this is how much I loved her, and screw you, Dad, for what you did.
I can see that.
Okay.
And he put them in the Alcobaça monastery, right? That's a pretty impressive spot.
Yep. And get this, he had Inés's body dug up from where it was buried in Coimbra and brought all the way to Alcobaça, 70 miles.
Wow, that is dedication. He was serious about giving her the royal treatment. But what's so special about the tombs themselves? Besides being fancy, I mean. Anything symbolic about them?
Oh, yeah, tons of symbolism. For starters, they're right across from each other, like they're gazing into each other's eyes for eternity.
Okay, that's actually kind of romantic for a guy so into revenge and all.
Right. And there's more. On Inés's tomb, there's a carving of her lying there, wearing a crown. And by her feet are statues representing all these virtues, justice, charity, that sort of thing. It's like he's trying to present her as this perfect queen, totally worthy of everyone's adoration.
So it's like he's saying, this is my queen, forget what my dad said.
Exactly. And that crown she's wearing, that's a direct challenge to his dad's whole thing about, rejecting her. He's making a statement.
Powerful stuff. He used these tombs to cement her legacy, to tell his version of history, and maybe even to, get the last word with his father.
It's amazing how love and grief and politics can all get tangled up, and the fact that these tombs are still around today, people still visit them, that says a lot about how powerful their story is.
It really does. But it also makes you wonder, doesn't it? We've talked a lot about Pedro's side of all this, but what about Inés? What was her experience?
That's the big question, isn't it? And that's what we're going to talk about next.
We've spent a lot of time in this deep dive talking about Pedro, his motivations, his actions, all that. But what about Inés? What was going on in her head? We don't really get the full picture from these sources, do we?
It's tough, right? With historical figures, especially women, their own voices kind of get lost. They're overshadowed by the, official story.
Yeah. It's like she's always this tragic figure, the beautiful victim, just swept along by fate and Pedro's obsession. But I wonder, what if we could hear her version?
Right. The podcast you sent in, it touches on that a little. What if she kept a diary? That would be amazing to read her thoughts about falling for Pedro, dealing with the royal court, all the pressure from the king.
Ooh, I like that. Inés, late at night, riding by candlelight, spilling all the tea. What would she say about their love? Would it be like this epic romance that Pedro made it out to be?
Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe she'd write about being torn, loving Pedro, but also scared of what it meant for her family. She was a noble woman too, right? She probably had her own ambitions. It wasn't all about being Pedro's wife.
That's a good point. It's easy to forget that, seeing her through Pedro's eyes and all. She had her own life, her own complexities.
Exactly. And we don't really get to see those in most of the historical accounts. What did she think about being caught in the middle of this whole power struggle between Pedro and Alfonso? Did she feel used? Or maybe she saw it as a chance to get some power of her own.
Ooh, intrigue. Maybe she was playing the game too, behind the scenes.
Right, we just don't know. But
Yeah.
that's part of what makes her story so interesting, It makes you want to fill in the blanks.
And even without all the answers, there's something about her that just draws people in.
Hmm.
Why do you think that is?
It's a question people have been asking for ages, right? I think partly it's that we can all relate to losing someone we love, that feeling of injustice,
Yeah. But there's got to be more to it than that, right? It's not just that she died tragically. It's also about how her story has been told and retold over time.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost like a story about storytelling itself. Pedro had all this power, and he used it to create a very specific image of Inez. She's a martyr, a victim of his cruel father, and that image, it's stuck around. It's inspired art, poems, music.
It's like she's become this blank slate that people can project their own ideas onto,
Yeah.
about love, power, what history even means.
Exactly, and I think that's why she still fascinates us. We see ourselves in her, in a way. She's about love, loss, trying to find your voice in a world that wants to keep you quiet.
So even if we don't know everything about Inez, what can we learn from her story?
It reminds us that history isn't black and white, It's not just dates and facts. It's people, real people, with their own stories. A lot of those stories we never get to hear. And it makes us think, who else is missing from the history books? Whose voices haven't been heard?
Yeah, it makes you want to dig deeper, to look beyond the surface.
And even when we don't find all the answers, just the act of asking those questions, trying to imagine, that's valuable too.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I mean, wow, what a story. Thank you for sending us all this stuff.
Oh, anytime. It's been fun talking about it.
And to all you listeners out there, if you want to learn more, we've got links to all the sources in the show notes. And make sure you subscribe to The Deep Dive for more deep dives just like this one. We'll be back next week with a brand new topic, so stay tuned.